Phrase Yesha Yemini. Eilu Barechet, Veilu Basusim, V'nachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazkir. Ema Karav Nafolu, V'nachnu Kamnu V'Maseilu. Adonai Hashia, Amelech Yaneinu V'Yem Kareinu. Okay. So we are continuing in the Maimer, Tzemach Tzedek, Derech Mitzvah Secha. Maimer of Hashbasas Chometz, Achilas Matzah. And we are in Ois Beis. So in the booklet here, it's page 2, Ois Beis. Now he's explaining what it means that matzah actually provides us with Amunah. Not only matzah is a symbol, reminds us, but it actually produces Amunah. He starts off by giving a mashal. The mashal is that a child, a little child, the Gemara says will not have the ability to say Abba v'Ima until Tayim Tam Dagan, until he tastes the taste of Dagan, of grain. The first period in his life, he's only drinking the milk, and then he starts eating grain. And that's when it starts developing in him that he's saying Abba and Ima. Nevertheless, even though he's attached to his mother, he's attached to his father, but of course, this child has no concept, no understanding what it means that this is your father, this is your mother, what it involves, what the implications are, and what the relationship really is all about. But nevertheless, the child does have some recognition, as we see that the child is very attached. In fact, they wouldn't go to anyone else. They just want to go to the father or the mother, or the father or mother walks away, they start crying. So the point that he brought out was that although when the child says Abba v'Ima, has no concept, no understanding whatsoever of all the depth behind those two words, but nevertheless, in his saying Abba v'Ima, it sort of includes in it and contains in it all the depth of what it's really all about. So let's continue on this part. So again, this is page 2. And it's the Ois Beis of the Maimer in Derech Mitzvah Secha. And where are we holding? One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. Maybe we'll go back a little bit. Let's go back to Ois Beis, the beginning Ois Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the beginning. The first word on the line is Dagan, and we're going to start with V'hine. V'hine, in Kriyosei Abba v'Ima, when a child calls out Abba v'Ima, Achati Mosei Tam Dagan, obviously it means, what does it mean after tasting Dagan? It means that after tasting this food, that develops a certain part of the brain of a child that was not developed before. That's what it means. So therefore, we're saying that this is a point where now he recognizes something he didn't recognize before. But nevertheless, Eina Yediv Asogamitis, what he recognizes is not really the true recognition. Mahu Oviv, what does it mean that this is his father? Shehu Hayosem leader. What does it mean that he's the one that brought him into the world? Or similar things, or all other implications of what it means if he's your father. The fact that he's chelik mimaycha, like it says in Tanya, that the child is part of the brain of the father, and that evolves into the sperm, and then evolves into a child. Or the idea that the father has this compassion for a child, an unconditional love and compassion for his child. and he has a desire, the farnasai, to provide for him, l'chalkalei, to take care of all his needs. He has no concept, no understanding of all this. The child does not recognize all this. Rak, all he does is, he just calls out, Abba, that's all he does. But the true meaning of those words that he himself is saying, the true meaning of those words, it's above his understanding. So in other words, that he's not aware of. All he's aware of is Abba Ve'ima on his level, which is level of a little baby. We can't say that there's no recognition at all. He does recognize the father and the mother, which means he recognizes them and distinguishing them from other people. He's not going to turn to someone else. As we see, children are very attached to their father and their mother. That means there's a certain degree of recognition. And we said before, the fact that what I should say, it won't happen until he eats tam dagon, that basically means that this degree of recognition is developed by eating this food. Before that, he doesn't have that degree of recognition. Okay. In Kozer, sorry. I know this. What does this mean? That this knowledge, which is the true understanding, mitis, the true understanding and the true significance of a father or a mother, which the child doesn't get. This is found in his mind in a way that it's condensed, so to speak, in his brain. In other words, B'kriya Zu, when he calls out, Shakira Abba, Yesh Behelem, in a hidden way, Kol Inyan Amiti, all the ramifications of Abba and Ima are in those words and in that outcry of Abba, Ima. So basically, he's bringing out 2 points. That both things are true. On one hand, when the child says Abba Ima, he has no clue of all the implications of what it means to be Abba Ima. On the other hand, that when he cries out and says Abba Ima, there is some recognition. It's not just words that are coming out of his mouth babbling. There's a recognition. We see he recognizes his father and mother. And therefore, what he's saying is in that recognition, you have condensed, in a sense, all the depth and all the meaning and all the significance, which is absolutely true, is sort of condensed in that. It's like taking, it's like saying that the whole tree that's going to come out in the future is already found inside the seed. The human being that's going to grow up later with hands and feet and eyes and nose and mouth and all the organs and all the different faculties that he has, it's included in that original cell, which is the source of this human being that's going to come out later. So in a sense, when a child says Abba Ve'ima, that little tiny bit of recognition includes in it, where he says Abba Ve'ima, so that includes in it the real depth of what it's all about. Good morning. Give another example. So he says, halacha, like a person who learns a halacha imtinik with a child. So here's a little boy that's starting to learn, and he learns a halacha with him. Shemaylim ha'amchus, he conceals all the depth, sheeshbay. Everything that's there. In other words, this halacha, where does it come from? It's a pasuk in Chumash. And the pasuk of Chumash can be interpreted different ways. And Beis Shammai says this, and Beis Hillel says that. And then there are pages in Gemara where Beis Shammai argues his point, and Beis Hillel argues his point. And then there are rabbis who came in a later generation and they said this and they said, it doesn't tell this to the child because we'll just confuse him. What does he tell him? Just this is the halacha. You got to do this, this, and that. The gam zeh, and sometimes even the little bit that he tells him, he gives him a mashal because even the halacha, as it is, might be a little bit too deep for him. So he gives him a mashal. So in the child's head, he has this halacha. But the in kol zeh, harehu maskil psak halacha shu tachlis amitis in hamuskim adeu amkus. The ultimate, the result of all the dialogue and the result of all the debating and the result of all the pages of Gemara and Mefarshim on the Mefarshim. It can be pages and pages and pages, but the end result is, and therefore you're not allowed to eat chametz until this hour, after this hour. And you tell them that. So in that, it includes everything that led up to that conclusion. But consciously he's not aware of it. It's included, it's contained in what you told him, but he doesn't have all that depth in his conscious mind. And when you take something through something else, it's also considered that you took it. In other words, when it comes to certain things in halacha, and you take something, it makes no difference if you're taking it with your hands or you're using some sort of a tool to take it. It doesn't matter as long as you're taking it. He's using that as a analogy that when you take a certain concept, even though you're taking it through this one line of halacha, but in that line of halacha is included all the depth and all the details and all the dialogues and all the pages that we know that are found in the Torah that lead up to this conclusion that you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, you have to do this. It's all included in that. Do we need a mushal for the mushal? And the mushal understood. Let's go to the next page 3 on top of the page. Continuing in Ois Beis. So the same applies to the call when the child calls out Abba v'Ima. That the child is when is the child able to do that? That after tasting dagon, what I said before, that means the dagon develops something in the child's brain which is undeveloped before. Without the dagon, so clearly the dagon is something which develops his brain. That gives him a day hadagon nimshach layidiyazu shibemes megadlis hadas. And this knowledge of a father and a mother is really something very deep, very broad, vast. But this deep, broad, vast subject is condensed in the little bit of word and little brain of the child, the way he understands it. I mean, really, it applies to anything that a child knows, but he's using a muscle that's more connected, and as we'll soon see, it reflects more relation with Hashem. But think of anything that you explain a child, and then he's going to use this as an example, a muscle to the muscle, right? If somebody, let's say, for example, won the world championship in chess, and he has in his house a trophy that says on it that this person in this year won the world championship in chess. And a 3-year-old asks, "What's this?" So he says, "Well, this your father, your uncle won the world championship in chess." Does he understand what that means? Does he get it? And if you tell me yes, I'll change the story to a 2-year-old child. That's what you're talking about. So you say there was a game and he won the game. Oh, now I got it. He won the game. What? But what does it mean? World championship of chess? He can't. He can't understand that. That's out of his league. And you have to understand what it means that it's the whole world is involved, and what kind of competition that was, and on what scale is this person's skill that he won world champion. Can't understand it. But when he understands that this thing was given to him because he won that world championship, he has the idea in a little capsule, so to speak. And anything a child understands, whatever you tell him, you talk to him about Hashem, you talk to him about Torah, whatever you tell him, he understands it on a childish level. But whatever you're telling him, it includes the emes, but in a very condensed way. And therefore, Tzemach Tzedek is saying the same is here with the calling out of Abba v'Ima, and that's what he's gonna apply. The same as with matzah. We'll soon see. Now, how is it possible that actually Dagon, simple grain, should develop something in that person's brain? So he says, the Dagon, this power in grain is the source of grain comes from which sphere? The sphere of Chokhmah. So because it comes from the sphere of Chokhmah, it develops a certain degree of Chokhmah in the child's head. Like it's known from what the Arizal writes, Alinyan habracha amoitzi lechem in the oretz. That you make the bracha amoitzi lechem in the oretz. So the Arizal writes that really the source of bread comes from grain, comes from wheat. But where does it come from in the spiritual realm? What's the real source? The real source is from Chokhmah. And that source of Chokhmah descended and evolved and became invested in these Gashmizik things. So therefore, it has an effect on developing the Chokhmah of the child because the source of the grain is Chokhmah of Hashem.
What's the result saying?
Who?
The result about the Hamadzi.
What does he say?
Yeah.
It says etc. In the word etc. is included everything the Arizal says, but I don't know what he says. I'm like that child. I just say Abba Ima. Apparently, I don't know if he interprets it into the words and makes it out of the word Meitzi or Lechem or whatever it is, but he says that when you make the bracha Meitzi Lechem and Aretz, the implication of that is that the real source of bread is from the earth, but the ultimate source of the bread is not the earth, but from Chokhmah of Atzilus. So basically, the bread has an element of Chokhmah, and then when I absorb that develops the Chokhmah in the brain of the person who's eating. And same with the child. So this is all the mashal. This is all the mashal. Now we're going to go back to the nimshal, how it applies to us and Amunah and Matzah. Because that was the question in the beginning. What does it mean that Matzah gives Amunah? Yeah, there is a winyan matzah. Matzah is mehei mine dogan. Matzah is supposed to be made from grain. Davka. That's what it's made from. She mitzvahs Hashem, and this is a mitzvah of the Eibishter. V'yiyeh aydei zeh hamshachas das alaki b'nefoshes b'nei Yisrael, and this will provide the Nevesh Elokis of a Yid to have this knowledge, that this will develop within us to have an understanding of how Hashem and the world are one, and every person according to their capacity. But what we understand is so much less than what the real understanding is all about. Just like the child understands what it means to be a father and a mother, he doesn't really understand the implication, doesn't understand the significance. There's just a little tiny drop that sort of contains everything in it. Same with us. When we say we understand and we have a munah that Hashem of the world is one, what we understand is insignificant to the real understanding of how the world and Hashem is one. But nevertheless, it includes all that in it. That's what he's saying. We call our Father in heaven. Like it says, Ki ata avinu, you are our Father. This means that in our hearts, the purpose of matzah is to plant that amuna, the muhusei batzmusei is baruch, and the essence of Hashem, that Hashem is so much greater and so much higher, more than what we can see with our eyes, which means don't just understand Hashem of how he's manifested through creation to realize he's infinitely greater than what he invested in creation. And Hashem is not like the neshama gives life to the guf, but Hashem is so much greater than that. He's infinitely greater than what he invested in the world. And in fact, what we see through the world is Mamala Kolaman. And what's really affecting the creation is Seva Kolaman. What's really giving true light to the world is something else, is Seva Alayhem, as explained before. And being that it's Seva and it creates it every second, the Ayin Liyesh, so therefore the whole world is really non-existent as a separate entity, and in terms of its as an independent entity, it's like kaloi, it's like nothing. We can't even use the word oid, which would mean it is something that's just secondary, it's something greater. It's not even oid, and the world is totally bottled to Hashem. So basically what he's saying is that this idea that we're explaining that the world of Nefesh is one, it's very difficult for us to really grasp it. Because after everything's said and done, we see the world as a separate entity. We feel ourselves, we perceive everything as what it is. We have to learn and study and talk to ourselves and convince ourselves there's something deeper and something higher. The world is really not what it is. So therefore, for us, even if we understand what it says in Chassidus, and even if you learn one maimer and another maimer and another maimer, at the end of the day, we still don't really get it. But nevertheless, the little bit that we get contains in it all the depth, which means the real understanding of what the world and Hashem is one, what it really means, is in a sense condensed, and it's included in the knowledge that I have. I'm not sure if it brought a reference to this, but it says sometimes in Chassidus that how the sun is huge, right? Huge. But if you look into a barrel of water, or the moon, look at the barrel of water, you can see the whole thing is reflected in the barrel of water. The barrel is this small, and the sun is reflected there. But the sun is millions of miles away, and the sun is tens of thousands of miles bigger than a little drop of water. But it's reflected in it. Same thing here. The real depth of understanding is reflected in the little bit. And therefore, it's like saying when I say a pasuk chumash, let's say Idul Chitas, I'm saying a pasuk. I understand superficially what it says. But being that this is a pasuk chumash, it really contains in it everything Rashi says, everything the Gemara says, everything any commentary ever said, everything that we don't even know in Kabbalah, in Nigla, in Midrashim, it's all included. When I say that pasuk, I'm including it. I'm absorbing the pasuk, but I'm absorbing everything else that's included in it. So when I am having that amunah through the matzah, I'm like that child who says Abba v'Ima, that it includes and it contains in it the real, true significance of Abba v'Ima. The next piece is going to elaborate a little bit more on both things. Number one, what the real true meaning is. And number two, that how much we do understand or don't understand in the subject. So we see we're still in Ois Beis, but if I would have to say what is the summary, what is the main point of this Ois, this is the main point of the Ois, to bring out that just like a child says Abba v'Ima, he doesn't have any idea of the real significance, yet it's included in his outcry of Abba V'Ima. Same thing with us, and the mashal would be like the Mishnah that includes everything that's found later in the Gemara. Same thing with us, but we have this Amunah, even though we don't really understand it as it is the emes, but it includes in it the true understanding that Hashem and the world are absolutely one. And what helps to develop that? Matzah. And how does matzah do that? Because matzah comes from Hashem's chokmah, and that develops in our brain the ability to grasp something so deep.
So why we don't eat matzah on the
The whole year.
yeah. If it's so strong.
It'll be so much amuna, it'll be too much.
Okay. I know people eat matzah.
What?
I know people that eat matzah. Yeah, there is people eat matzah.
They say that the Rebbe would eat matzah the whole year. Not only matzah, but he would eat matzah even during the week, the entire year. But the answer to that is that if you eat matzah today, you're not observing a mitzvah. Which means that we eat it on Pesach because it's Pesach, because it's a mitzvah. So then matzah has that spiritual power. It's like having a computer that's not just an ordinary computer, an amazing computer. It costs $3,522.62. It's a very good computer. But if it's not plugged in, it's a klum. Right? Plugged into the switch or plugged into Wi-Fi, whatever it may be. If it's not plugged in, it's worthless. Matzah has its power during the 7-8 days of Pesach, because that's when there's a certain of Hashem that's shining in the world. But after Pesach, it doesn't have that effect anymore. So why did the Rebbe eat matzah after Pesach? My first answer is I don't know. The second answer is it could be that being this matzah was here during Pesach, it contained in it this certain spiritual power, so it sort of lingers on. There's a little rishim, something is left, and it could be used even during the year.
What about that idea that which doctor that would add matzah to their medicine?
Right? That was Alter Rebbe had a doctor that whenever he gave medicine, he took crumbs. Alter Rebbe gave him matzah, so he kept the matzah, and in his medicines he put crumbs of the matzah in it. There's a story with a chassid of the Alter Rebbe that he had a certain illness. He went to a doctor in Russia. Those days, the big doctor lived in Petersburg, or wherever it was, one of the big cities. The doctor examined him and said, "There's nothing you can do for him, and he has about 12 months to live." He went to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said, "Go to Rabbi Abram the Reuter, Rabbi Abram the doctor." He went to Rabbi Abram the doctor, and gave him his medicine with the matzah, and he lived. A few years later, he was walking down the street in Petersburg, and the doctor sees him and recognizes him. He said, "What? You're still around?" Like, what are you doing on this planet? So he told him, "There's a doctor in Ladi or Lajna that gave me a medicine." He said, "I have to find the doctor." He couldn't believe it. And he went to Lajna, he met with the doctor, and he told him, "Well, he puts crumbs of the Alter Rebbe's matzah in it. That's probably what did it more than the medicine." No, I know people that the Rebbe gave the matzah even after Pesach. Well, first of all, Pesach Sheni we eat matzah, right? But that wasn't Pesach Sheni. And there was a famous shliach in Australia. His name was Rabbi Groner. He was a brother of this Rabbi Groner, who was the Rebbe's secretary. But he was like very, very dynamic person. Dynamic. I mean, he built up the whole sort of Australia. But he went there as a shliach. And he knew the Rebbe yet before the Rebbe became Rebbe. Anyway, one Pesach, the Rebbe said he's giving out matzah to all those that went to speak in different shuls. You know how the custom is, during Pesach, people go to shuls in different neighborhoods, East Flatbush, and Borough Park, other places, and they give over a sicha. So one year, the Rebbe said, whoever went to shul to speak, I'll give him a piece of matzah. So he also walked over. Why did he walk over? He was hired as a sort of a part-time rabbi in a certain shul, and he would always go there to speak on Shabbos. So the Rebbe said to him, when he walked over, he said, you didn't go because of the mitzvah, you went there because you get paid to do it. So he tells the Rebbe, yeah, but the money they pay me doesn't match the speech that I give. Like what I give is worth much more than the money they pay me. The Rebbe says, well, that I have to check out with the people in the shul, not with you, you know. Anyway, the Rebbe was saying it all in a numerous way, but the Rebbe didn't give him matzah. But later, he went into Yechidus. Everyone knows his birthday is Gevura Shabbat Gevura. And he went into Yechidus, and then the Rebbe gave him a piece of matzah, pulled out of his drawer and gave him a piece of matzah. I remember the conversation. But I guess because this matzah was there on Pesach, even though Pesach was over, it probably contains in it something a little sort of left over, lingers into the matzah from what happened on Pesach.
Is that the matzah that was used on Pesach?
What?
Has the matzah that was used on Pesach, or to be like any matzah later to that was made up?
I think that it wasn't baked after Pesach, it was baked, and it was there for Pesach, yeah.
You think the box matzah also has something in there, or it has to be like?
No, all matzah. Naturally, shmur matzah is something which is exclusive, something special. So whatever a general matzah has, shmur matzah has it in a more revealed way, in a more effective way. But whatever matzah is, all matzah has it. If it's kosher to use for matzah, that means it has it. You know. Okay, let's move along. V'hine. Any questions before we go on? No, everything's fine. V'hine. The emes, the truth is, Kol Yisrael Hamaminim B'nei Maminim B'Amuna Uman Amuna Kavua V'Yosel Baltimi. Every Yid naturally and inherently believes in Hashem, has Amunah in Hashem. And Yosel Baltimi means like it's nailed in and won't move. Chas v'sholem. To the point people are ready to give up their life for Kiddush Hashem. Nevertheless, even though they have that amunah, they really don't understand the essence of what is the essence of Hashem. And what does it mean that the world is bottled to Hashem? We learn about it. We make pictures on the board, we explain it, but still to understand that when you talk about Hashem, that the world is considered bottled to Hashem, like the light of the sun inside the source, we don't really understand it. Kiziv Hashem is b'shemesh, like the light of the sun inside the sun itself, shein aziv nire klau, that inside the sun you don't see the light as a separate entity. In the source, all you see is the source. In other words, the light there is part of the source. It's not, doesn't have its own identity. We can, but over here, we're different. We see the world, and we see the world as a separate entity. We see things happening. It appears, the way we perceive it is independent of anything else. Because we don't see the chayas. So in other words, we don't see the source. We don't see that there's anything else that's giving it light, that's sustaining it. So we see things in the world as separate and independent. You can only picture this idea in our heads. And here he says something very powerful, but this is also from Tanya. If we would see the light force of Hashem, the way we see the Gashmis, let's say we see the table physically, imagine we'd also see physically the same way the Chayas that gives life to this table. If that would have been the case, then we wouldn't even see the physical table. We'd only see the Chayas. Like it says in Tanya, Chelik Beis, Perek Gimel. In other words, it's like the sun. What did the Alter Rebbe say? The reason why we see sunlight here and all over the world is because the light of the sun is outside of the sun. But in the sun itself, in the source, you can't find light. In the source is only one thing, which is the source. But wait a second, light has to be there because that's where it's coming from. It is there, but in the source, it's part of the source. And you can't find it as an independent thing of the source. Same with us, that the light of Hashem gives life to the table, to the chair, to the trees, to the mountains. And the reason why we see the mountain as a separate entity is because we don't see the chayas that's sustaining it. If we would have seen the chayas that's sustaining it, which means, if we, just like you say, if you would see the sun itself, in the sun, you wouldn't see the sunlight. So in the source, you wouldn't see anything separate, just the source itself. So the reason why we see the world as independent is because we don't see the source. If we would see the source, we wouldn't see anything else outside of it. Naturally, this also needs an explanation. It doesn't go into it here, but the Rebbe once gave a very deep sikh explaining this. Like, what does it mean? Does it mean the world is not a real existence? But it just says, so I keep repeating it for that reason, that we're not saying you wouldn't see the world doesn't exist. It means we wouldn't see the world the way we see it now. We would see it as one with Hashem. We would see it as part and extension of Hashem. We wouldn't see it as a separate, independent entity of Hashem. That's what it means. Okay, this part gets a little bit more deeper, but hopefully we'll get through it. We'll stop here and we continue. Zerwitz, I brought that letter for you. Yeah, but I can't find it. I left it in my office somewhere. I'm sorry. Maybe it's here. What? Yeah. So that's so much saying. Yeah, I left it downstairs. I'm sorry. I prepared it on top of this. I shouldn't forget it. I have no idea how it disappeared. What? יכול להיות, כן.
אוקיי.
לאחד, כן.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Shabbos. I love you.